So let's dig deeper here in terms of how this all happens, okay, which is basically due to the fact that we are all conditioned socially, meaning that from the moment we come into this world, we come into a society, and in this society, there are certain traditions, there are certain rules, there are certain guidelines, there are certain demands in order to help us all live together and survive together as a whole. Okay, there's what's acceptable and what is not acceptable. And the first thing to understand here is that from the moment we are born, we are handed all of these traditions, rules, guidelines, and demands by our family, our friends, school, work, the media, I mean, you name it. And we accept them as unquestionable truths due to the way that we learn. Okay, and this is key. There are two ways that we learn. The first is firsthand experience, where you try something out and test it for yourself firsthand. But the other way is through secondhand experience. And this is where a lot of what we learn comes from. Why? Because we don't have time to test everything for ourselves. Okay, you don't have time to go test everything firsthand. So a lot of the information, a lot of what you accept as a truth, you've not tested it firsthand. You've learned through secondhand experience. And the way that we do this is that we filter information and ideas through, one, how certain someone is of their ideas, two, how in alignment they are with their ideas, and three, the number of other people who also buy into those ideas. Okay, how much authority that person has, if you will. And if an idea passes through these three filters, we accept it as valid, even if it isn't. Okay, so to illustrate this point here, let's just say right now you've never clapped before, and you've never heard someone clap before. And I tell you, hey, if you put your hands together like this, it'll make a sound. And you can't test this firsthand. What you're going to do is you're going to look at me and you're going to ask yourself, once again, how certain is Julian right now of what he's telling me? And let's just say I'm very certain. I'm like, hey, if you do like this, it's going to make a fucking sound. And I'm very aligned with it. Let's just say my life is aligned with this information. Like if you clap, it's going to make a sound. And I have 1,000 people agreeing with me, also telling you, and they're also very aligned and certain with this. So like, yep, if you do this, it'll make a sound. What you're going to do is check, 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 valid. You've not tried it for yourself. You didn't test it firsthand. You accept it as valid because it passes through these three filters. And guess what? Although a lot of these rules and demands, okay, that are handed to us from the moment we're born are meant to help us all survive and thrive as a society, not all of them are accurate and not all of them benefit us. Okay, they've just always been there and we've all just taken them for granted. They pass through those three filters, and again, we just accept them and we live our lives following these unquestionable truths. And this is something that I personally first realized with Success with Women, where I realized very fast that, whoa, a lot of the ideas out there about sex, about dating, about relationships are completely wrong, and no one is saying anything. It's like, what the fuck is this? Like, we've all just accepted these ideas. They're complete bullshit. They're completely wrong, but everyone views them as unquestionable truths, but it's not real. If you actually go try it out firsthand, it's completely wrong. It's not a fucking truth. And this started waking me up to it all. I'm like, whoa, if that's not true, if that's wrong, then what else may be wrong? And as we've discussed, the other big one that's completely wrong that we all accept as an unquestionable truth is that our default is scarcity. Okay, that original false assumption. And everyone is assuming this. It's just always been like that from the moment you're born. Hey, everyone's default is scarcity. That's your baseline. That's your foundation. That's your experience of yourself. And we just accept it. Okay? And then, of course, we live assuming that, and everything that we do just reinforces it, and we become more entrenched in that paradigm built on that false assumption. And because we all accept these unquestionable truths early on during our upbringing, okay, this is when we're just taking information in like crazy in order to get our bearings in life and survive, they then grow stronger and stronger over time. Okay, there's that momentum, that charge behind them. And this is the reason a lot of your subconscious beliefs, assumptions, and definitions come from your childhood. Okay, you're thrown into this world, you know nothing, you can test a few things firsthand, but you're just gonna look around you and try to suck in as much information through secondhand experience as possible. Okay, and you're around your parents, which have a lot of authority, or teachers who also have a lot of authority. So it's similar to, okay, how many other people buy into this? If your parents tell you when you're young, don't do that, or this will happen, you will accept it as a truth. And what happens is, okay, as we discussed before, if this is your mind, you have your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, that belief or assumption, you will accept it and just put it in your subconscious. Okay, scarcity is your default. Okay, done. And it's going to stay there, and guess what? Over time, there's more and more momentum, there's more and more charge. Or if you look at your parents for, again, that definition of love. You look at their relationship, and let's just say they fight a lot. There's a lot of drama. As a kid, you're looking around, you're like, okay, that's what a relationship looks like. So relationship, love, a lot of drama. And because, again, you accept it very early on as a truth, it just stays there in the back of your mind and just keeps building and building and building that momentum, that charge. Okay? So a lot of your beliefs about what you deserve in life come from your childhood. Another example is like at school. You go to school, you get bullied. Maybe I'm not one of the popular kids. You know, I don't deserve more than this. So say, again, this is what you want, but you know you don't deserve more than that. That seed is planted, and over time, it grows stronger and stronger and stronger. And of course, they're even more reinforced because you're now operating from that. And of course, you become more and more entrenched in a paradigm built on this. So this, as I mentioned before, is what we call social conditioning. It's what shapes the way we perceive, understand, and interpret the world. This is what creates your map of the world. This is how it all happens. So this is the first thing to understand. And the second thing here, to go even deeper, is that when we're children, due to the way that we're raised, which is you're rewarded when you're good, and you're punished and shamed when you're bad. It's like you do something naughty, it's like shame on you. Bad, 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 no. You're like, whoa, you're shamed, you're punished. The worst form of punishment being your parents withdrawing their affection from you, giving you the impression that you're no longer loved. You do something bad, go to your room. They go from loving to no, go to your room. You're like, wow, shit, they don't love me anymore. There's all that affection gone because I did something naughty. I did something quote unquote bad. Okay, this is the way that we're raised. You're raised to be good. They want you to fit in society, be good, and you're conditioned this way. You're good, you're rewarded, you're bad, you're punished. And because of this, on one hand, we're immediately conditioned to believe that we're not good enough to be loved for just being ourselves. We're only loved when we do something that's acceptable, when we do something that is good. If we're naughty, suddenly we're no longer loved. So we're like, whoa, for me to be loved, I must always be good. For me to be loved, I must always do things that are acceptable. Okay, which reinforces again that your default is scarcity. Your default is not abundance because you're raised thinking that you're only loved conditionally. And no matter who you are, no matter how good your childhood is, none of us, if you really sit down and think about it right now, believe that we were loved unconditionally. You think your parents love you unconditionally, not from our perspective as children. Okay? None of us right now believe that we are enough. And if I ask you why, you're saying, well, just because it's always been like this. From the moment you're born, you're conditioned to believe that you're only enough if you're a good kid. If you do something that is good. Okay? And this is a little side note, it's not your parents' fault either. It's easy to blame your parents, like, oh man, they conditioned me to not feel like I'm enough. I don't believe it because of them. No, okay, they love you unconditionally, but they just don't know how to show it. Okay, and from our perspective too as children, we interpret it in a way where they love me, they don't love me. Versus they still love you, but They're withdrawing affection to try to teach you to fit into society. Okay, so we interpret it a different way. That's how we're raised. It's really the result of social conditioning. Okay, don't blame yourself. Don't blame your parents. It's just what it is. Blame society. Blame the way that we're conditioned. But this here is really the beginning of that endless chase, of us just chasing more and more and more, chasing validation, chasing approval, chasing love. If you're a guy, it's like chasing girls. Like, this is why I got into success with women, chasing money, chasing fame. If you're a self-help junkie, chasing improvement, like continuously self-improve. It comes from there. Like, that's why we do it. It's like, why do we all crave it so much? Because we're still trying to be good. We're still trying to attain unconditional love. We're attempting to live up to the conditions and requirements that we imagine would earn us this conditional love. From our parents, from our friends, from society, from everything. It's like, if we're good little kids, if we get good grades, if I'm successful, if I do this, maybe then. That's where it all begins. Okay, so this happens. And on the other hand, what also happens is that due to the fact that we're children, we're also relationally dependent on our parents and families for survival. We depend on them for shelter, protection, food, just everything. We die without them. When they withdraw their affection, when they emotionally dismiss or disapprove of you, it feels like death from our perspective. Okay, if you've been punished and sent to your room, it's extremely traumatizing, because the way that we interpret it is, whoa, they withdraw their affection. They don't love me anymore. If they don't love me anymore, they could abandon me. And if they abandon me, I die. So it's traumatic, and it becomes a matter of life and death. Our survival depends on it. Our survival depends on us being good. Our survival depends on us only doing things that are acceptable. Our survival depends on us meeting these conditions and requirements. And we don't just do it for love, we do it for safety and security. And this is really why all of this happens. This is why we banish all of these aspects of ourselves into the depths of our subconscious, because they're not acceptable. Okay, this is how it happens. You say you're growing up and your parents are like, no, don't be jealous. Say you have a sibling, you're jealous of your sibling. No. You're like, oh my God, being jealous is unacceptable. If I'm jealous, they withdraw their affection. If I'm jealous, I'm no longer loved. If I'm jealous, they may abandon me. If I'm jealous, I may die. And because it's so traumatic, you banish this aspect of yourself down here. You're like, this is not me. You try to get rid of it, okay? And this leads to suppression or repression, okay? It's really this trauma, like life or death, just overwhelms you. It's what leads to this. The difference being suppression is when you consciously banish this in your subconscious. Repression happens when there's just so much guilt, for example, over something that it doesn't even register consciously. Okay, that's when it's just unconsciously just boom, just banished there. You don't even have a memory of that aspect or the event or the experience. Okay, and this is also a tradition that we all have in our society. Everyone else does it. Why wouldn't you do it? Just keep suppressing, repressing, trying to get rid and just disapprove of these aspects of yourself. Okay, you do it in order to conform, to live up to the rules, the conditions, in order to survive. And this is why you create this split. Up here, this is everything that's acceptable. Down here is everything that's unacceptable. Jealousy is unacceptable. I remember as a kid, if you like a girl, so you're a guy and you like a girl in school, you're shamed. There's another really common one for guys. You're shamed, it's like, oh, that guy likes this girl, and everyone mocks you. There's the song, say Julian and Sarah sitting in a tree, and you're like, whoa. And there's another situation of a traumatic experience. So like, oh, everyone's laughing at me. Oh my God, I'm not fitting into this whole environment. And again, survival, that instinct just kicks in. You're like, me liking a girl, let's banish that. Let's banish that. Let's never show that I like a girl again. And you're ashamed of it. And then, of course, say you want to go interact with someone you're attracted to. There's that extreme anxiety because you don't want to re-experience this. You've just tried to get rid of it. Okay. Another one, I can relate to this. You're a kid and you're extremely loud, and people's like, shh, fit in, don't be so loud, don't talk back, be quiet and listen. It's like, well, I can't be loud, I can't express myself, I can't talk back. Singing was another one for me, where I remember my parents just playfully teasing me, like nothing bad, just playfully teasing me, and I'm like, whoa! Again, felt like life or death. Suppress that. Singing's unacceptable. So there's all this shit, and we all have it, okay? And it's not just bad stuff, as a little side note, and we'll get to this. We also suppress good stuff, but this is really the birth of the ego, okay? What is your ego? It's this. Everything that is acceptable. That's your ego. This is you telling yourself, only this is me because this is good. All of this shit down here is not me. I don't like this. I don't identify with this. No. Okay. And this is another reason why ego equals effort. Okay, remember that. Ego equals effort, because there's now this constant struggle to keep this alive and to only act through this. Every time you have a thought now, instead of just expressing it authentically, you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Does this thought fit into what's acceptable? Does this thought fit into what is good? And if so, you'll say it. But if not, oh, that thought was bad. You suppress it. Okay? And, you think that if people saw the real you, they wouldn't accept you, they wouldn't like you. This is another reason we never feel like our default is abundance. We never feel like we're enough because there's all this shit about us that we don't like. You try to get rid of this. It's like, oh, me who likes girls, me who's jealous, me who sings, that's bad. Me who has this horrible little thought, oh my God, it's so bad. Why do I have all this shit that is bad? And how can you feel like you're enough if there's all this shit you don't like? And it's still you. And as we discussed, it doesn't go anywhere, and it just keeps amplifying on repeat over time. Okay? It's the birth of the ego. It's the birth of self-hate. This is when you really start hating yourself, because you start literally rejecting all these different parts. You're like, I hate this. Why do we hate ourselves? Because of this. We think there's all this shit that's unacceptable. Okay? And I do want to reinforce here too, when I'm breaking this down, that it's not necessarily the rules and guidelines of society that are bad, but it's how, as children, we interpret them. We have a very little experience in life. We have a very limited perspective. We haven't developed the capacity yet to interpret nuance. And this is why we experience this trauma and why this happens. Okay, it's not the rules per se. This doesn't mean like, no rules in society. Like, fuck no. Of course there needs to be rules, but the way we interpret them is life or death, suppress. And they just stay there and they run us even as adults. Okay, this is also, as another little side note, what Eckhart Tolle would call the pain body. And we think that, hey, the only way to survive now is just to keep this down, to hide it. And maybe the more we try to keep it down, the more we try to disown it, the more we punish ourselves, eventually it may go away. And it doesn't, okay? And also in terms of self-hate, we think, after a few traumatic experiences in the real world, we think that punishing ourselves and just keeping it down is better than someone else punishing us. It's better than our parents punishing us. So in a way too, we are our biggest bullies. You are your biggest bully. You are the meanest person to yourself. And you don't do it to be mean to you. You do it as a form of protection. You do it in order to survive. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this program, this is really the source of all our misery, because you keep hating yourself. And because you keep abandoning all of this, you constantly live this life of escapism. You're trying to keep it down. You're trying to escape this. You're never fully alive. You're never present because you're always monitoring it. You never know yourself fully. Okay, when you bury something in your subconscious, when you try to disown it, you are living a lie. You still feel, you still are, you still have all of these unacceptable traits, all of these unacceptable things, but you're acting as though you don't. Okay, and to make it clear too, this doesn't mean that you need to act on these, but due to the way that we interpret them as children, it makes us feel like, again, everything about it is bad. Okay, and the more you keep these down, the more estranged you become from who you truly are. This is why we don't even know what we want out of life. We're all confused. You don't know your purpose because you don't know you. You lose touch with what is authentic. It cuts you off from yourself, which in turn cuts you off from other people. You can't develop relationships. You can't develop friendships. And you're just completely lost and isolated with no sense of belonging. You also kill self-trust, okay? Because you keep rejecting and abandoning parts of yourself. You don't believe that all of you has your own best interest at heart. You believe that parts of you are against you. You believe that there is an enemy living inside you and you can't trust yourself fully. You walk around in this constant fear, always on guard. And of course, if you can't trust yourself, you can't trust other people. And I mean, that's just crazy. You know, like this is the reason too why people freak out when they hear, let go of trying to improve yourself. And what you will realize is that inspiration will kick in and you'll naturally be inspired to improve yourself. And people are like, no, I must make myself improve myself or I will just be extremely lazy. Why do they think that? Because they don't believe that they naturally, by default, have their own best interests at heart. They believe that if they stop micromanaging everything, all this shit would come out and they would be destroyed. Okay? And because of this too, you don't allow yourself to succeed. This leads to low self-esteem. It leads to self-sabotage. You don't feel like you're enough. You don't feel like you deserve things. And this is a huge success barrier. Okay, you've probably heard this quote, to get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. How can you deserve what you want if you know there's all this shit? You know, in relationships, I see it. Teaching guys how to meet women. They kill opportunities. Why? Because they don't even want a woman to be with them. Because there's all this shit about them. They're like, wow, if I'm so bad and there's all this unacceptable, stuff about me, why would I even want a girl to be with me? She would be getting the raw end of this bargain. She would be getting fucked over, and they'll kill it. They'll like repel people, push people away because they don't want anyone to be stuck with them. They hate themselves. They never feel like they're enough. And of course, the more you live in this state, the more you become addicted to it. And again, you live a life just continuously, either consciously or unconsciously, undermining your own success, undermining your own progress. You think too that, hey, even if you get it, you'll lose it anyway, because eventually one of these unacceptable things will pop up. And that's your life. You live in a state of chronic stress, always on the edge, because you must now always control this. There's that, you're just worn out. It's exhausting. Always trying to hold yourself together. It's just a horrible way to go through life. This is also why maybe in a calm environment, it's like maybe in watching this video now, you feel it. No matter where you go, just bubbling up down there. And you have to always control it. It eats you up inside. You never feel safe. You never feel secure. And of course, the worst thing that happens is that this then leads to serious health problems. And all of this is just getting worse and worse with the whole PC culture that is now popular. Being very politically correct. There's just more and more that is considered unacceptable. And again, it's not just bad things, but pretty much everything. There are more and more rules to be good, to fit in. The standards are raised, and it's literally reached a point where it's become impossible to live up to it. It's like our egos are now on steroids. It's like, you can't just be this, but now the only little bit that's acceptable is this. So we hate ourselves more and more. There's less and less things that are okay to say or do. Again, we live in this world of just taboo. It's like everything is taboo. We're heading in a direction where, I joke, we're all going to end up speaking in sound bites like politicians. And we're just suppressing more and more and more. And what's important to understand here too with this whole PC culture is that although the intention behind it is to help, it's not getting to the cause and it's making things worse. You know, like say with being politically correct, you're trying to get rid of racism, okay? What happens is instead of getting to the cause, and asking yourself maybe, okay, why is someone inspired to be racist? And it's usually because they have things that are suppressed there in the first place and they hate themselves in the first place. What you do is you're like, hide it. If you're racist, hide it even more. And then they hate themselves even more and it just, again, fuels the racism. So you never really get to the cause. Shaming, making people suppress shit, it just never works. And if someone's PC out of shame, it's like they're not doing it because they're inspired to do it, they're doing it out of fear, okay? So we're really just right now living in this world of just complete inauthenticity. A lot of these issues too, like say racism, in order to address them, you can't be politically correct, you can't be PC. So now you're even trapped by getting to the cause. And I mean, it's crazy. Again, eventually it's like, there'll either be like a dot left that's acceptable or just nothing left that's acceptable. So this is really how it all works. Due to the way that we're conditioned, we create this split, we suppress all of these aspects, all these parts of ourselves, hoping that they will go away, but in reality they just stay there. And because we have a very limited perspective as children, again, this is why it happens, that trauma, and this is what starts that race of just never-ending chase, trying to meet certain conditions or requirements, why you really don't believe that abundance is your default. So this is why, I mean, it's also crucial to really dig up all of this and let it go.